The universe was silent that night, filled only with the soft hum of distant stars and the quiet breathing of machines that never slept. In the control room of the human outpost Vigilant Dawn, Captain Ryland Cross sat alone, staring at the endless darkness of space through the wide glass window. It was supposed to be another peaceful shift, another night of watching the stars and checking the sensors. But fate had other plans. Suddenly, the silence was broken by a strange sound. The communication screen flickered once, then again. Static filled the room, a strange broken signal cutting through the noise like a whisper from another world. Ryland frowned and leaned closer. "Is that a transmission?" he muttered, his voice low. The system identified it as an old distress frequency, one not used for decades. The sound was weak, full of static, and kept repeating one word: help. He turned up the volume. The voice that came through was trembling, full of fear. It was a woman's voice, maybe young, maybe a mother. "This is Colony E-17. We're under attack. Please, anyone, they're coming." The signal cracked, faded, and then a child's scream echoed faintly through the static. Then nothing. Silence again. Ryland froze in his chair. He replayed the message again and again, trying to clean the noise. His heart beat faster with each replay. The coordinates attached to the signal made no sense. It was coming from the edge of known space, far beyond any official human colony. But he could feel something deep inside him, a pull, an instinct that whispered this was real. He called his communication officer. "Trace this signal," he ordered. "I want to know where it came from, who sent it, and how long ago." The officer worked quickly, running the data through layers of decoding. After a few tense minutes, she looked up. "Sir, this came from the Doran system. That's supposed to be uninhabited." Ryland leaned back slowly, eyes narrowing. "Then who sent it?" he asked quietly. The officer shook her head. "I don't know, sir. But if it's real, someone out there needs help." Ryland stood up, his mind already racing. He had seen too many battles in his lifetime. Too many times when help came too late. Humanity had fought wars across the stars, lost colonies, and even lost faith at times. But one thing never changed. When someone called for help, humans answered. He opened a secure channel to Central Command. The screen glowed red, showing the symbol of the Earth Federation. A tired admiral appeared, his face half lit by the blue light of his console. "Captain Cross, why are you calling at this hour?" "Sir," Ryland said, straightening his back, "we've received a distress signal from deep space. It's unregistered, but it's human. They're begging for help." The admiral frowned. "Deep space? Probably a trick. Could be pirates. Or worse, alien bait. Don't get involved." "With respect, sir," Ryland replied firmly. The voice on that transmission was human. "I heard a child scream." The admiral hesitated for a moment. He had seen that look before. The same determined fire in the eyes of every human commander who refused to ignore a cry for help. "Send me the data," he said finally. Ryland transmitted the recording. The admiral listened quietly. For a few seconds there was only static, then the broken plea again. "They're coming. Please help us." The admiral sighed heavily. "We'll verify it. I don't take action yet." The screen went dark. Ryland turned to his crew. "Prepare the fleet communication relay. If command won't act, we will. Humanity doesn't turn its back on its own." The officer hesitated. "Sir, are you saying we move without orders?" "I'm saying," Ryland said, eyes sharp as steel, "if someone's out there dying, we don't wait for permission." Word spread quickly. Across the ship, crew members whispered about the mysterious SOS, the ghost signal from the edge of the stars. Some said it was fake. Others said it was a trap. But deep down, every human aboard felt the same thing, a pull they couldn't ignore. Hours later, confirmation came from command. The signal was real. The colony code matched a missing settlement from decades ago, one that had vanished after losing contact with Earth. For years, people believed it was destroyed in a meteor storm. But now, after all this time, someone was still alive out there calling for help. Ryland's hands tightened into fists. "How many more years were they waiting?" he whispered. "How long were they alone?" The next few hours were chaos. Engineers flooded the hangars, checking the engines of long-unused warships. Technicians updated ancient weapon systems. Soldiers packed gear, medics prepared supplies, and pilots ran diagnostics. Even the older crew members, veterans of past wars, felt the old fire return. Ryland stood on the command deck, watching the fleet's status reports flicker to green one by one. He knew what this meant. If they went, there would be no turning back. But something about that child's scream haunted him. It was not just a distress call. It was a reminder of what humanity once stood for. Outside, the blackness of space stretched forever. Somewhere in that darkness, people were praying for help that might never come. And somewhere inside Ryland, he knew that help would come. Because that was what humans did. He remembered stories his father told him about the old days when Earth first reached the stars, when explorers would risk everything to save strangers. Back then, humanity had been feared and respected. But over time, the galaxy had changed. Politics, treaties, fear, it had all softened them. Now everyone saw humans as calm traders and diplomats. But they had forgotten what humans could become when pushed too far. Ryland looked at the stars and whispered, "Let's remind them." He sent out a coded message to nearby fleets. It was short, powerful, and clear. SOS received. Colony in danger. All available units assemble. Within hours, replies began flooding in. Captains from across sectors sent confirmations. Some came from battle fleets, others from cargo ships converted for war. The message spread faster than light, faster than anyone expected. Every soldier, every captain, every ship that received it understood one thing. Someone needed saving. On the observation deck, Ryland watched the first wave of ships prepare for launch. Engines lit up like blue suns cutting through the darkness. He felt pride and fear mix inside him. What if this was a trap? What if they were heading into a slaughter? But then he remembered that scream again, faint but real. Even if it's a trap, he thought, we go. Because that's who we are. The night before departure, he couldn't sleep. He walked through the quiet corridors of the ship, listening to the soft hum of the engines. He saw soldiers writing letters to their families, engineers polishing their weapons, pilots staring silently at the stars. None of them knew what awaited them, but none of them turned back. In the morning, when the final launch order came, Ryland stood before his crew and said, "Out there, someone believes no one is coming for them. Today we prove them wrong." Engines roared. The stars blurred. The fleet moved out. Far away in the cold dark of the galaxy, the faint SOS still played on a broken loop, whispering its desperate cry. "Help us. Please, anyone." And somewhere the universe held its breath, because humanity had just begun to move. The message spread faster than light, jumping from one outpost to another, carried by whispers, rumors, and urgent military codes. It started as a small transmission from Captain Ryland Cross, but within hours it reached across the vast human colonies. Every captain, every commander, and even retired soldiers felt the same spark awaken inside them. Humanity had been quiet for too long, living peacefully under interstellar treaties. But now a single SOS had broken that silence. At first, many thought it was just a myth. Some officers said, "No one could still be alive out there after all these years." Others said it was a trap, an alien trick to draw the humans into a war. But those who had served in the old wars knew better. They had seen this before. A weak cry for help that no one believed in until it was too late. They would not let history repeat itself. Across the stars, messages began to appear on secure networks. Fleet captains volunteered their ships. Civilians offered cargo vessels. Old war veterans came out of retirement sending simple words, "Count me in." In the great shipyard of Titan Prime, the largest human dock in the solar system, alarms sounded as engineers ran to their posts. Massive warships, some untouched for decades, came alive again. Engines that had not burned in years roared with new fire. Welding sparks flew across the hangars as crews repaired hulls, replaced weapons, and restocked supplies. The order from the top command was still uncertain. The Galactic Council had warned humanity to stay calm, to wait for more information. But humans were not known for waiting. When a voice cried for help, they moved. That was their nature, wild, emotional, and loyal to the core. On the colony world of Nova Helios, Admiral Cora Dane stood on a mountain balcony overlooking the shipyards. She had fought beside Ryland in the Orion Wars years ago. She had seen his courage, his stubborn heart, and his belief that no human should ever be left behind. When she heard that it was him who had received the SOS, she knew this wasn't going to be a simple rescue. It was going to be a storm. She opened a communication link directly to him. "Ryland," she said, her voice calm but sharp. "You've stirred the galaxy again. He smiled faintly on the other end. Someone had to, Cora sighed. You know what the council will say. They'll call this an act of aggression. Let them call it what they want, he replied. I call it humanity. And with that she gave her own silent command. Her fleet, the Iron Shield, was to prepare for immediate launch. Her officers didn't question her. They knew exactly what she was doing. The fleet would move with Rylan, whether the politicians liked it or not. In other corners of human space, the same story repeated. A mining freighter from Mars converted itself into a makeshift carrier. A group of mercenaries offered escort ships. Civilian volunteers began gathering supplies, food, medicine, ammunition. Even school children recorded messages for the soldiers heading out to rescue the forgotten colony. Bring them home, one child said in a trembling voice. Humanity had always been divided by governments and borders, but this time, something greater united them. The cry for help from that lost world reminded them all of what it meant to be human. It wasn't about power, it wasn't about pride, it was about compassion, loyalty, and courage. Meanwhile, on alien worlds across the galaxy, panic began to rise. News had reached the Galactic Council that humans were mobilizing. Hundreds of ships were gathering, many of them outside official control. To the other species, this was terrifying. They remembered the last time humanity had gone to war. Entire systems had burned. The humans had earned a name then, Deathworlders. In the grand hall of the council, alien ambassadors shouted in fear. They're gathering a fleet. They will destroy us all, one cried. They must be stopped before they bring another war. But the humans' representative, a quiet diplomat named Mara Ellis, stood calmly and said, We don't start wars. We end them when someone calls for help. The council chamber fell silent. No one had an answer to that. Back on Vigilant Dawn, Rylan stood before the holographic map of the galaxy. Tiny blue dots marked human ships joining the cause. One by one, they blinked online. From distant moons, from orbital stations, from forgotten outposts, everywhere ships were answering the call. The screen glowed brighter with each passing hour. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Aaron Holt, stared at the map in disbelief. Sir, there are over 100 ships already. Battleships, carriers, transports. It's like the old war days. Rylan nodded slowly. Then it's true. The fleet is waking up. They called it the Deadliest fleet, named after the faint dying star near where the signal had come from. It was a name chosen by the soldiers themselves. Dark, powerful, and full of purpose. Every ship carried a mark on its hull. A single white star surrounded by black. It was the symbol of the forgotten and the promise that they would not be forgotten again. As the fleets gathered, something remarkable began to happen. Old rivalries disappeared. Commanders who had once fought each other now shared strategies and supplies. Humanity became one voice, one purpose. They were not moving to conquer. They were moving to save. Still, deep inside every heart, there was a storm brewing. They all knew what this meant. If they found that colony destroyed, there would be vengeance. Humans were emotional beings, and mercy often faded when their own were harmed. On the 11th day after the signal, the fleet's assembly was complete. Over 100 ships now orbited the moon of Arcturus Prime. It was a breathtaking sight. Metal giants lined in perfect formation, glowing engines ready to leap across the void. The quiet hum of energy could be felt even from the ground below. Inside his ship, Rylan stood before his crew. Look around you, he said, his voice low but powerful. No one forced us to be here. We came because we chose to. Somewhere out there, people are waiting, maybe scared, maybe dying, but waiting. And when humanity answers, we answer together. The crew listened in silence, some with tears in their eyes. They weren't fighting for medals or orders. They were fighting for people they had never met, simply because that's what it meant to be human. Far away in a dark observatory, an alien intelligence officer watched the human fleet through a telescope. His hand trembled as he recorded his report. They're coming, he whispered. The humans are moving again. He turned off the recorder, fear written across his face. And they're not coming for war. They're coming for justice. Back in the fleet, the final preparations began. Ships aligned, coordinates were locked, and hyperspace drives charged. The sky filled with streaks of blue light as smaller ships joined formation. Communication channels buzzed with voices, orders, prayers, and quiet goodbyes. Admiral Cora's voice echoed through the fleet network. This is Admiral Dane of the Iron Shield. To all captains, On behalf of every soul that was ever abandoned, every cry that went unanswered. Today, we stand as one. And then Ryland's voice came through, calm and steady. The council called it a trap. Maybe it is, but if it's a trap meant for us, they'll learn what happens when you trap humanity. The countdown began. 10 seconds to jump. Every heart beat faster. The stars seemed to hold their breath again. As the engines roared and the void began to twist around them, Ryland looked once more at the message still playing on his console, the voice of that woman begging through the static. Please. Anyone, he whispered softly, hold on. We're coming. In a flash of blue light, the fleet vanished from orbit, leaving only silence behind. And across the galaxy, the legend began to spread once more. The humans were moving, and when humanity moved together, nothing could stop them. The journey through deep space was long and silent. The stars outside stretched into streaks of blue as the fleet moved through hyperspace, faster than light, towards the coordinates of the SOS. Every ship in the Deadliest fleet carried the same feeling, a mix of hope and fear. Inside each control room, screens glowed softly, showing data, coordinates, and heartbeat signals of hundreds of thousands of soldiers ready for what was to come. But no one knew what exactly waited for them on the other side. Captain Ryland Cross sat in his command chair, his eyes fixed on the endless patterns of light passing outside. His ship, Vigilant Dawn, led the formation. He could feel the weight of every life under his command. He didn't speak much, but inside his heart a storm was building. What if they were too late? What if the colony was already gone? These questions haunted him, but he pushed them aside. He had made a promise to answer the call no matter the cost. After days of travel, the moment finally came. The fleet began to slow down as they approached the Doran system, the source of the distress signal. The stars returned to normal, and silence filled the ships again. Sensors immediately came alive, scanning every inch of the dark space around them. Then the first images appeared on the main screen. Gasps filled the control room. The planet that appeared before them was no paradise, it was a graveyard. Black smoke covered its surface. Huge craters glowed with fire. Entire cities were gone, replaced by ruins and ash. The colony that had once been full of human life was dead, but the signal was still coming from somewhere deep below the surface. Ryland stood up slowly. Open a wide-range scan, he ordered. The radar expanded, showing dozens of alien warships orbiting the planet. Their designs were strange, sharp and insect-like, with red energy lines pulsing through them. They were harvesting something from the surface, loading it onto their carriers. The room fell silent when they realized what it was. Human bodies. Ryland's hands clenched tightly. His voice was quiet but full of fire. They're still down there, killing survivors. Lieutenant Aaron's face went pale. Sir, do we wait for reinforcements? Ryland didn't hesitate. No, we are the reinforcements. He opened a fleet-wide channel. This is Captain Ryland Cross. You've all seen it. The colony we came to save is burning. There's no time for debate, no room for fear. Those ships down there, they're not leaving the system alive. The response came in waves. Dozens of captains confirmed their readiness. Across the fleet, engines roared to life. The calm, disciplined silence of the fleet turned into the heartbeat of war. The first human missiles launched, streaking through the darkness like falling stars. Seconds later, the alien ships detected the attack and space exploded into chaos. Beams of red and blue light tore across the void. Massive explosions lit up the horizon. The battle for Doran had begun. Ryland's ship took the lead, diving straight toward the nearest alien destroyer. Target their engines, he shouted. The gunners locked on, and within seconds the enemy ship burst into flames, breaking apart into glowing pieces. The crew cheered, but their joy was short-lived. 3 more alien ships appeared behind them, firing beams that sliced through one of the smaller human vessels. Eagle 7 is hit. They're going down, a voice cried over the comms. Ryland's jaw tightened. Pick up their escape pods. No one gets left behind. The space around them became a storm of light and sound. Ships moved in tight formations, covering each other, taking hits and returning fire. Humans had always been known for their unpredictability in battle. They didn't fight by logic or pattern. They fought with heart. Every loss made them angrier. Every scream pushed them harder. Admiral Cora's fleet arrived from hyperspace just as the battle reached its peak. Her massive flagship, Iron Shield, opened fire with its heavy cannons tearing through enemy lines. Her voice echoed through the fleet network. To all ships, push forward.
Drive them off our world!
The aliens fought fiercely, their ships moving like a swarm, fast and deadly. But humans fought differently. They adapted, improvised, and refused to back down. When the aliens tried to retreat, human ships cut off their escape routes. When they tried to ambush from above, humans fired from below. The galaxy had forgotten how terrifying humans could be when their emotions led them. Ryland's ship shook violently as an explosion hit their side. Sparks flew across the bridge. Alarms blared.
Shields at 40%.
Aaron shouted. Hold steady, Ryland yelled. We're not done yet. Through the smoke and fire, the captain saw something strange. A massive alien command ship hovering above the planet. It was larger than any other, covered in strange symbols and dark energy. From its belly, hundreds of smaller ships poured out. That was the source. That was the heart of the enemy. Ryland knew what had to be done. He opened the fleet channel again. That ship is their command. We take it out, the rest will fall. Form with me. We go straight through them. His words spread through the fleet like fire. Dozens of ships broke formation and followed him into the storm. Alien lasers rained down, cutting through space, but the humans didn't stop. The fleet moved together like a single creature, roaring forward through the chaos. Missile banks ready, shouted Aaron. Fire everything we have, Ryland ordered. Hundreds of missiles streaked forward. The alien command ship fired back, hitting 2 human destroyers and shattering them into debris. But the rest of the missiles found their mark. The explosion that followed lit up the entire system. The command ship began to crack open, pieces breaking away as fire poured from its hull. A cheer erupted across the fleet. But Ryland didn't smile. He was watching the surface of the planet. Send in the landing teams, he said quietly. There might still be survivors. Dropships launched from the hangars, descending through the smoke-filled atmosphere. On the ground, soldiers stepped onto burned soil, moving through the ruins of the colony. The air was thick with ash and silence. Buildings were broken and streets were full of dust and echoes. One soldier stopped when he heard a faint noise, a cough. He ran toward the sound and found a small bunker half buried under debris. Inside, they found them survivors. Weak, starved, and scared, but alive. Back on the ship, when Ryland received the report, he closed his eyes. For a moment, he allowed himself to breathe. We found them, he whispered. We found them, but the relief didn't last long. As the landing teams rescued survivors, a transmission came through from one of the soldiers. Sir, you need to see this. The video feed showed the inside of an alien research chamber underground. There were cages, human cages, dozens of bodies, lifeless and pale. The aliens had been experimenting on them. Ryland stared at the screen, his eyes hardening with each passing second. Burn it, he said coldly. Burn it all. That day, humanity's rage filled the sky. The remaining alien ships tried to flee, but the Deadlight fleet showed no mercy. Every last one was destroyed. Fire and light filled the stars until there was nothing left but silence. When the battle ended, space was littered with wreckage and ashes. Thousands of human soldiers had fallen, but they had saved the survivors. The cost was heavy, but to them it was worth it. As the survivors were brought aboard the ships, one little girl looked up at Ryland with tired eyes. You came, she whispered softly. Ryland knelt beside her. We heard you, he said gently, and we'll always come. For the first time in years, the galaxy witnessed what it truly meant for humanity to fight, not for power, not for conquest, but for one cry for help. And in that moment, every species that had doubted them remembered the old truth. Never wake the human's heart, for when it burns brighter than the stars themselves. When the fleet was finally ready, the air around Earth felt different. The once silent orbit now hummed with energy. Thousands of ships floating in formation like stars gathered for war. Every engine glowed blue, every cannon armed and waiting for a single word. Go. Humanity had never looked so united before. Nations that had once fought over land and power now stood shoulder to shoulder for survival. There was fear, yes, but it was mixed with something stronger. Determination. Admiral Marcus stood on the bridge of the flagship Eternal Dawn, his eyes fixed on the giant holographic map showing the location of the SOS signal. It came from a world deep within a dangerous region of space known as the Crimson Veil. No one had ever gone there and returned alive. The message that started this all, help us, they are coming, was now their reason to risk everything. Humanity didn't know who had sent it or what kind of threat waited there, but they couldn't ignore a cry for help, because once, centuries ago, they too had been helpless. The crew members moved quickly, checking systems, tightening armor locks, and loading torpedoes. Inside there was silence. No one dared to speak loudly. It was as if they all knew they were about to face something beyond imagination. Marcus turned to his second-in-command, a woman named Captain Liara, whose eyes were cold but steady. "Ready the fleet," he said simply. "We jump in 5 minutes." When the countdown began, everyone's heartbeat matched the ticking clock. In those 5 minutes, many thought of their families, their homes, and their planet, spinning quietly behind them. Some whispered prayers, others closed their eyes to remember why they were there. To protect life, to honor the promise that humanity would never stand aside when someone needed help. The engines roared, space twisted, and in a flash of blinding light they vanished from Earth's orbit. The jump ended in chaos. Ships appeared from hyperspace surrounded by clouds of red dust and lightning storms. The sensors went wild, detecting unknown energy signatures. Then they saw it, a broken planet hanging like a shattered mirror in space. Parts of its surface glowed as if it had been burned from within. Around it drifted hundreds of destroyed ships, torn apart, silent. The fleet froze. This was where the SOS had come from, but there was nothing left alive. Marcus clenched his fists. "Search for survivors," he ordered. Drones flew out, scanning debris fields, sending back images of twisted metal, drifting helmets, and empty escape pods. One of the pilots whispered, "Sir, it's like a graveyard." But before Marcus could respond, the alarm screamed. A massive shadow moved behind the red clouds, a shape so large it blocked out starlight. The scanner struggled to read it. "Incoming object." It's a ship, sir, but not like anything we've seen." From the mist, a monstrous vessel emerged. It wasn't made of metal. It looked like it was alive, its surface pulsing like muscle, its eyes glowing with burning red light. Then a deep, echoing voice filled every ship's communication system. "You should not have come here, humans." The voice was not from any creature known to them. It was both mechanical and alive. Before they could react, beams of energy shot toward the fleet. 3 ships exploded instantly, their flames lighting up the void. "Evasive maneuvers," Marcus shouted, gripping the console. "All ships, return fire." Space lit up like a storm of suns. Missiles streaked forward, laser cannons fired. But the alien ship's armor healed itself as fast as it was damaged. Marcus realized they were facing something beyond technology. It was almost supernatural. "Target its eyes," Liara shouted. "That's where it's controlling the energy." The fleet focused fire, and finally cracks appeared. The aliens screamed, a horrible echoing sound that made every human tremble. But even as they fought, smaller ships, dark and insect-like, emerged from behind the giant creature, swarming toward the fleet. The humans fought desperately. Fighters launched, spinning between debris, trying to protect the larger ships. Explosions filled space like stars being born and dying in seconds. Marcus's voice remained steady even when the bridge shook. "Hold the line! For every world that calls for help, for every voice that fears the dark, we are their shield." The battle raged for hours. The alien fleet outnumbered them, but the humans had something their enemies did not: unity, emotion, and memory. Every commander, every soldier fought not for power but for hope. They remembered Earth, the blue home that depended on them. They remembered the SOS that had started this mission. Even if the ones who sent it were gone, humanity would honor their last cry. At one point, when the flagship took heavy damage, Marcus was thrown against the floor, bleeding. Alarms blared, smoke filled the bridge. "Sir, we're losing power," a crew member cried. Marcus coughed, struggling to his feet. "Divert all remaining energy to the main cannon," he ordered. "We'll end this here." Liara stared at him. "That will burn the ship." He nodded slowly. "Then we'll burn together, but we'll take it down." The order went out. Power drained from every system. The ship's lights dimmed until only the cannon's glow remained. A bright, blinding white light building at the front of the ship. Marcus looked at Earth's symbol painted on the console and whispered, "For humanity." Then he gave the final command, "Fire." A beam of energy exploded from the eternal dawn, piercing through the alien's chest. For a second, everything went silent. Then the creature let out one last scream before collapsing, its body breaking apart into red dust that scattered through space. The smaller enemy ships lost control and exploded one by one. The sky went quiet again. When the smoke cleared, the fleet floated among wreckage and silence. Half the ships were gone, but humanity had survived. The SOS had led them into the heart of darkness, and they had faced it with courage no one would ever forget. Marcus stood weakly, looking at the dying light of the alien remains. "We answered their call," he said softly. "Even if they're gone, we showed them what it means to be human." Liara placed a hand on his shoulder. "And now the galaxy will remember that too." As the surviving ships turned back toward home, the broken planet behind them slowly faded into the distance. The signal that once cried for help was gone, replaced by a new message, one that would echo across the stars. When humanity answers an SOS, the universe changes forever. The journey back to Earth was quiet. The once proud fleet now moved like a wounded beast, slow and broken. Many ships were gone, their ashes drifting in the cold silence of space. Those who survived carried memories that would never fade, the screams, the fire, the endless battle under the red sky. But within that silence there was also peace. They had done what no one else dared to do. They had answered the call. Humanity had faced the unknown and survived. Admiral Marcus stood on the observation deck of the Eternal Dawn. The stars looked different now, softer somehow, as if the universe itself was breathing again after a long cry. His reflection in the glass showed a tired man with bloodshot eyes and silver hair. But there was something new in those eyes too, an unspoken pride. Behind him, the crew worked silently, their movements slow, respectful, as if they were walking through a sacred place. Every life lost had meaning now. Every sacrifice had built a legend. When they reached the orbit of Earth, the whole planet waited for them. The blue marble below glowed brightly, filled with cities, oceans, and billions of people who had prayed for their return. Communication channels flooded with voices, families crying, leaders shouting thanks, children cheering. Humanity had been afraid that its greatest fleet would never come back. But when the first ship appeared in the sky, people fell to their knees and wept. Marcus watched from above, emotion filling his heart. "They don't know what we saw out there," he whispered. "And maybe they never should." Liara stood beside him, her uniform torn and her arm in a sling. "They don't need to," she replied. "All they need to know is that we came back." Marcus nodded slowly. "Yes, we came back." When the fleet finally landed, heroes were greeted with flowers, flags, and tears. But the celebration didn't erase the pain. Hospitals overflowed with the injured. Families of fallen soldiers stood quietly at ceremonies, holding medals that could never replace their loved ones. Yet in every heart a quiet pride grew. Humanity had shown the galaxy that compassion could be as powerful as war. The SOS that had once sounded like a cry for help had become a symbol of courage. Months passed. The wreckage from the battle was collected and studied. Scientists tried to understand the alien technology, but what they found only deepened the mystery. The creature they had fought didn't come from any known region of the universe. It was older, something that had lived before stars were born. Records from other civilizations hinted that such entities had wiped out countless worlds before, feeding on fear and destruction. But this time it was stopped. By humans, news of the victory spread across galaxies. Civilizations that had once doubted humanity's strength now reached out with respect. Treaties were signed, alliances formed. Worlds that had once stayed silent in their fear began to rise, inspired by the story of how humans fought not for power, but for a promise to never ignore a voice in need. Humanity had become more than just a species. It had become a legend, but not everyone saw it as glory. Some of the surviving soldiers carried nightmares that never ended. They saw the red sky when they closed their eyes, heard the screams of the dead echoing in their minds. Marcus himself often woke in the middle of the night, sweating and shaking. He would walk to the window, stare at the moon, and whisper the same words. "We answered their call." It reminded him that they didn't fight for medals or fame. They fought because it was right. One evening, a young journalist visited Marcus for an interview. "Admiral," she said softly, "the people want to know what it felt like to face something so terrible. To know that you might die out there." Marcus looked at her, then out the window at the stars. "It felt like being human," he said simply. "To fear, to fight, and still choose to protect someone you don't even know. That's what makes us who we are." The journalist hesitated. Do you think humanity has changed after this? Marcus smiled faintly. Yes, before we looked up at the stars and saw danger. Now we look up and see responsibility. Years passed. The Eternal Dawn was retired and placed in a museum, standing as a monument to the courage of those who fought in the Crimson Veil. Children walked under its massive hull, pointing in wonder as guides told them stories of how humanity's deadliest fleet had saved unknown lives far beyond their world. For many, it became more than just history, it became a lesson. A reminder that strength was not in weapons but in unity and mercy. Liara eventually took command of a new peacekeeping program. She traveled across different star systems, teaching other civilizations how to defend themselves, not just with power, but with purpose. Sometimes she would stop and gaze into the void, remembering Marcus and the battle. He taught me, she would say, that sometimes the bravest thing a soldier can do is answer a voice in the dark. As for Marcus, he spent his final years quietly near the ocean, far from war and noise. He often sat on the shore, watching the waves crash under the golden sun. The sound of the sea reminded him of the hum of the engines of space and of the crew who never returned. One evening, as he watched the sunset, a small communication device beside him beeped, a signal from deep space. He smiled faintly as if he already knew what it was. A message appeared on the screen, simple and strange. Thank you. He stared at it for a long time, his eyes filling with tears. Maybe it was nothing, maybe just interference. But in his heart, he knew the SOS that had started everything had not been in vain. Somewhere, somehow, someone had survived. And they remembered. When Marcus passed away a few years later, his last words were recorded in his journal. If the stars ever cry again, humanity will answer. Those words were carved into his memorial, standing beside the museum where Eternal Dawn rested. Every year, people from across the galaxy came to lay flowers there. Humans, aliens, and beings of light, all united by one story that changed the universe. Decades later, as humanity continued to explore new worlds, a strange new signal was received. This time it wasn't a cry for help. It was a song, a peaceful melody broadcasted from a distant system, the same one where the SOS had first come from. Scientists decoded it and found words in it, written in both human and alien symbols. The translation read, "We are alive, and we remember the ones who answered." The message spread like fire. People gathered in streets, schools, and homes, listening to the melody that echoed across every channel. It was beautiful, haunting, full of life and gratitude. Humanity had given its blood to save strangers, and now, the universe sang back in thanks. On that day, the world stopped fighting itself for a moment. Nations stood together again, realizing what they were capable of when united. Children grew up hearing stories not just of war, but of compassion, courage, and connection, and high above in the quiet of space, where ships once burned and heroes once fell, the stars seemed to shine brighter. They whispered to one another the same old story. The SOS that had unleashed humanity's deadliest fleet, the battle that nearly broke them, and the love that made them rise again. Because in the end, it was never just about war. It was about the heart of humanity, the courage to answer a call, the mercy to protect others, and the strength to turn even death into hope. And so, long after the admirals, the soldiers, and even the worlds themselves were gone, the legend lived on, a story carried on the wind of the cosmos, told from one generation to another. When the stars cry for help, humanity listens. And when humanity answers, the darkness itself trembles.